So I'm Gavin Beckett, I'm the Chief Enterprise Architect for Bristol City Council. Well, I guess we can start. So our transformation approach then has kind of built over the last 3 or 4 years, intensified in the last 6 months, but 3 or 4 years ago when we started to look at transformation, we realised that we had to start thinking about a kind of open approach to architecture, and that was through open data and open standards and open source, and appropriate combinations of those things whenever possible. And that was to support the ability for the organisation to change rapidly and to change and to recombine services in ways that they weren't provided before. And so we went out to look at the various components we would need in our technology architecture to support that future sort of vision of a council that could respond to change. And one of the things we needed to look at was the kind of document management and content management layer, so enterprise content management as a whole. And we knew that we wanted something that would cover the whole sort of range of team collaboration, creation of documents in an informal way, through to managing those documents more formally, and eventually to managing records. And we wanted something that was based on open standards, that was presented through online web services, that was able to be used directly by a user or hidden away behind a service to the public, or a workflow that maybe a member of staff was using, and they wouldn't even know that the documents were being managed, but that they were there in the background being accessed through open standards. And that's what led us to Alfresco as a choice of document management system. And then as we started to look at how were we going to design and implement that, that's what led us to working with Zaizi initially. And we did some work with them and our current partners at that time, Capgemini. And then over the last few years, we've kind of evolved our relationship with Zaizi, and as we've started to work along the lines that the Government Digital Service has been proposing, and look at using G-Cloud to buy services and to implement things in a more dynamic way. We've bought services for Alfresco design and implementation through that from Zaizi, and have achieved a lot over the last few years in terms of expanding from that initial base, which was fairly ambitious, but moving that outwards to even things like external collaboration. So we bought a service recently through G-Cloud from Zaizi to host Alfresco externally, and to be able to start working with external partners in a secure environment. But if you wind it right back to the original implementation, we had particular needs that we had to fulfill at that point around managing documents that were generated in a project we were doing in landlord services, where we were automating the repairs process. We were moving to an automated job management system, where basically you had people who did repairs would receive their jobs on their PDAs, on their tablets, and would go out on site and do their work, inspect things, and then they would record the outcomes of that. And if that was, say, something like a gas inspection, they'd need to generate a gas certificate, and that gas certificate would then need to be stored as a record back in the document management system. So we implemented in that project the use of Alfresco at the back end, and that provided that service to the front end application software. So that was our first kind of use of that pattern, and we did that work with Zaizi, and they then helped us to implement that same pattern in a further project where we made an online service, one of our first online services for homes in multiple occupation licensing. And again, the documentation that was generated by that process was stored in Alfresco, and the landlords who were replying didn't particularly know that. They were just generating a document, and that was being sent off to the council. But in the background, the team that was managing that flow of incoming applications were using Alfresco to access that. So that was kind of 2 or 3 years ago that we started doing that. And over the last couple of years, we've been really building up the usage of Alfresco internally, and we've been rolling out more and more team sites. And those have initially focused around collaboration quite a lot, and around managing the process of governance boards and team meetings and so forth. So, for instance, our strategic leadership team and our change board, which obviously involves a fair bit of paperwork, in terms of reports, proposals, agendas and minutes, that's all managed through Alfresco now. So we have a site which has its own dashboard, its forward plan, Documentation is obviously uploaded to Alfresco, and the alerts sent out to everybody, and people just go to Alfresco either on their laptops or on their iPads and use the app on the iPad, and they download the document, read it, and use it in the meeting without having to print. So we've eliminated paper, we've eliminated the kind of manual emailing of that document, and it's made things much more straightforward to circulate that kind of paper. So that's another major use, and then that's rolling out even further now. So it's not just the teams and the boards that need that kind of thing, it's also across the whole council. So we, just like lots of other councils, are going through a big accommodation rationalisation programme, a big cultural change programme around how we work, moving from kind of work being the places that you go to being work being what you do. And we've basically got to move out of several buildings into two large buildings, but with a significantly reduced amount of floor space. And we can't afford to store all the paper that we used to store. So we need to rationalise that. Obviously, a lot of that will be destroyed. The documents we need to retain, many of them will go off-site. And there'll be some which we need to have access to on a frequent basis, and they are going to go into Alfresco sites. They'll be scanned and they'll go into Alfresco sites. So the team we have in Bristol, we have an Alfresco specialist team working in our IT service, and they are supporting the project in designing and rolling out those document management sites for every part of the council that's moving out of those buildings and into this new, more flexible way of working. And of course, what it means by having all that all those documents in Alfresco is that you then free people from having to be in a specific location to look up that file, because it's there online. As I say, you can either get it on your laptop, you can get it on your iPad app, and you then have secure access to that information wherever you happen to be working. So, that's a big step forwards for us. And that's being rolled out to thousands of staff over the next, already gone out to hundreds of staff, and it's going out to thousands of staff over the next few months. So that's another big use of it. And then further on, we're going to kind of start repeating the pattern that I mentioned earlier around using Alfresco as the back end for digital services. So again, like many councils, local government increasingly implementing digital services, following the kind of lead that government digital service have taken. And again, we're applying that to the whole principle of openness and open architecture and open standards. So it's really important to us to have something like Alfresco with its sort of seamless, compliant interface, because we know that we can then look for ways of utilising that to get data in and out, or equally using the various standards-based integration APIs that are available through Alfresco. So what we're doing is building new digital services, and where, for instance, there might be a need to upload documents from the public. So for instance, we're looking at complaint service. If somebody wants to upload evidence of a situation they're complaining about, or maybe they've sent us a letter, or maybe they want to scan something in, then we need to be able to store that. We need to be able to store that securely, and we obviously want to use Alfresco for that. So we're looking at the ways we can link Alfresco in our back end of our infrastructure with the website and digital services, and also our CRM system, and the way that those things can interoperate, so that we can use one place to store the document but see it in many different places and access it from many different places. So I think what people expect from any organisation now is an almost frictionless experience where they find an easy way of sending us a message, whether it's through their smartphone or whether it's on a web browser. The forms are really simple and easy, and they can just send off their concern or their report to us. And they don't expect to have to deal with complexities in the back end. They expect it to just flow through, and they expect us to do the heavy work of connecting things together in the back end. So making sure that we've connected the requests with our systems, and any evidence that's provided with our document management systems. And so that whole back end, front end integration is something that people just take for granted in the age of Google and Facebook and Twitter. So using Alfresco as the document management system in the back end, and Zaizi's help in designing that work and implementing, developing the integration, working with our teams in the council, is part of creating that seamless flow for users, so that we can simply store their documents when they provide them, and provide that service without them realising that there's anything particularly complex going on in the back end. But one of the things that Bristol has wholeheartedly embraced from national kind of policy is the idea that we should be levelling the playing field and opening up opportunities for smaller and medium enterprises. And that particularly works in this space of open standards, open data and open source, because it's a way of a lot of small companies entering the market, because of that, it's obviously less difficult for them to actually get into that initial investment. And what we've found is that there's a very rich market, both locally around the city and the city region, but also nationally. And we've used GCloud a lot, and we've procured many services through GCloud over the last couple of years. And I heard recently that the figure is now that we're up to about 14% of our spending goes through GCloud. And almost every procurement we've done through GCloud, I think, is with an SME. So, working with Zaizi is part of that kind of picture, as is some of our local businesses. And we found that to be a very rewarding experience, because there's a sort of real focus and specialism often in the SME that you're working with, who can bring that to you, and you have direct access to that kind of deep knowledge of a particular product set, rather than the more generalist service that you sometimes get. So that's been really valuable to us, and it's quite a positive experience as well as an organisation like a council, working with small companies and then seeing them grow and seeing them gain business from other areas, and being part of that sort of economic regeneration and growth. Yeah, so working with Zaizi's been it's been a pleasure. There's a great team of people who are really passionate about alfresco and constantly trying to think of ways to help us kind of get the best out of it, and suggesting new ways of using it. I think also one of the first reasons we got involved with Zaizi was because of Alfresco's own, Alfresco the company's recommendation about Zaizi's quality, and obviously we know that through the fact that you guys are kind of won awards as part of the partner network from Alfresco. So I think we've used Zaizi on a number of occasions, and every time we felt that the expertise they bring to the project has been really well worth their involvement, and they've helped us to become more successful basically in the work we've done.